Consultative Council, we welcome you. From Côte d'Ivoire, we welcome you. From Niger Republic, we welcome you. From Morocco, we welcome you. From Mali, we welcome you. From Congo, we welcome you. We welcome those of you from Liberia. We welcome those of you from Gabon. We welcome our delegates and head of delegation from Djibouti. We welcome our heads of delegation and members of delegation from Burkina Faso. We also welcome members of delegation from Egypt, members and head of delegation from DR Congo. We welcome members of delegation from Rwanda, from Senegal, from Guinea-Bissau, from Sudan, from Burundi, from Kenya. We also welcome members of delegation from Uganda. We welcome members of delegation from Zimbabwe. We welcome members of delegation from the Republic of Ghana. Welcome members of delegation from Nigeria. We welcome members from Equatorial Guinea. Can we please give all of us a round of applause, please? We also welcome members of delegation from the Republic of Cameroon. And of course, we also want to welcome members of delegation from the AIPU and the PUIC, respectively. I'd like us to give all of you a round of applause, please. We're waiting patiently for the arrival of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He's going to be ushered in to lead the auditorium by the President of the African Parliamentary Union, who also doubles as the President of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency, distinguished Senator Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, as well as the Executive Chairperson of the Executive Committee of the African Parliamentary Union, who also doubles as the Speaker of the Popular National Assembly of Guinea-Bissau, His Excellency Kasama Cipriano. The President of the ECOWAS Commission is also joining us in this auditorium for this all-important conference. And I'm talking about the ECOWAS Commission President, who is also joining us along with his Vice President of the ECOWAS Commission, and a host of other dignitaries and members of the Executive Council, as well as members of the Judiciary of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Members of Diplomatic Corps are also here in the large numbers. We'd like to appreciate your presence. Thank you so very much. Now we also please, with the sound manager, please ensure that the volume of his microphone is up to a level where we can hear ourselves and everyone in this auditorium can hear us. We thank you for your very kind attention. leaders right. Help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true. Great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. Amen and amen. Please a warm round of applause as we take our seats.
and 31st Conference
of speakers of the African Parliamentary Union. And to formally welcome all of us to this event this morning, most formally, I have the privilege of inviting Your Excellency, Distinguished Senator Dr. Abubakar Bukola, CON, President of the African Parliamentary Union, President of the Senate, Chairman of the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I so welcome you to the podium. Can we please welcome him with a resounding applause?
Your Excellencies, Speaker of the Kenyan Parliament, Speaker of the Rwandan Parliament, Chairperson of the Women Committee, and also President of the Senate of Zimbabwe, Speaker of the Nigerian Parliament, and other Speakers of Parliament or member countries and heads of delegations. Your Excellencies, the President and Vice President of the ECOWAS Commission, Principal Officers of the National Assembly, Secretary General of the APU, members of the Federal Executive Council, distinguished senators, members of the House of Representatives, the Clerk of the National Assembly, heads of diplomatic corps, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be at the opening of the 73rd Executive Committee session and the 41st Conference of the African Parliamentary Union APU. On behalf of the executive members of the National Assembly of Nigeria, I welcome African parliamentarians to Abuja to these gathering of people's representatives from all over this great continent of ours. Let me also thank the APU for granting the hosting rights of holding meetings through Nigeria. I'm sure that these events will go down in the annals of the African Parliamentary Union as time well spent, both in terms of the objectives of the meetings and memorable experiences in our serene capital city, Abuja. Let me assure you that we are committed to doing all in our power to ensure positive outcomes in all fronts. As I welcome all the parliamentarians here, let me also, on behalf of you and all the others, also welcome our special guest, the President of Nigeria, President Cote d'Ivoire, who will take his time out to share with you for this morning. Well appreciated. This kind of gathering is important as it gives hope about the future of our country. It is in gatherings such as this that we come together to map out a common thread in issues affecting our country, come up with ideas for resolving those issues, and chart a greater picture for Africa. Seeing you all here today, eminent parliamentarians from all over Africa, I'm even more the many challenges confronting our country, on some of the pressing challenges of the moment. Indeed, the theme, the role of parliaments in the fight against terrorism, armed gangs and organized crime in Africa, and the promotion of private investment as a major factor in economic development in Africa, as well as the promotion of girls' education as an efficient way to fight early marriages in Africa, are instructive and germane to our efforts to stimulate economic growth and development in our country. Distinguished delegates, it is sobering to note that the economies of many countries on the continent are not growing above the ballpark rate of 3%. And yet populations are growing exponentially, and we have a huge youth demographic looking to governments to secure their future. We as legislators must play our own role in stimulating growth and development, in order to properly respond to circumstances and meet the expectations of our people. In most of our different countries, the cardinals or objectives of the executive arm of government in the areas of fighting corruption, good governance, fight against terrorism are all based on a great amount of support from the legislative arm of government to ensure that their programs are successful. And as such, it is important, particularly in the area of terrorism, that we work hand in hand with the executive to ensure that we have laws that will support their programs. It's clear that in order to achieve desired outcomes in the fight against terrorism and pursue economic growth and development, we must adopt regional and Africa-wide strategies. African governments should be supportive of one another and put a united front. The legislators are the vanguard of this. Collaboration is essential. We must share ideas and mechanisms for overcoming these challenges, and this conference is the most effective platform for doing so. It is my hope that at this conference, we will come together to find solutions to these challenges that are common to us. If terrorism, organized crime does not recognize borders, we must find an African problem, an African solution, and a collective solution. We must ask ourselves, what is the role of the legislative arm of government? How are we supporting the executive in addressing these germane problems of our continent? And we must do that. In developed countries, the legislation provides a very key role in addressing these problems. And we hope Africa, we will play a very key role in supporting the executive in doing this. As I say, it will permit me to reiterate the importance of good relationship between the executive and the legislative arm of government. We parliamentarians must see the executive as partners in progress so that we can collaborate effectively to address these problems. It is when we do that that we will defeat terrorism, we will make Africa safe, and we'll be able to work together on all this objective. In closing, my distinguished colleagues, permit me to say that the nucleus of legislative power in each country must not be neglected. Charity begins at home. In this scenario, it means that in order to effectively collaborate across borders for continental peace and progress, the legislator must first collaborate within borders. I would therefore encourage better relationship between members and the leadership of parliament in individual countries. It does seem to me that this is the foundation of the continental relationship we're striving for, and will give much flip to the work of the African Parliamentary Union. It is therefore my expectation by the end of these meetings, we'll have made significant gains for addressing the issues identified by the theme of this conference. I also hope that through constructive engagement and conversations, we will gain better insight from sister parliaments to enable us to find common solutions. I thank you for listening, and I wish you a successful conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. That was the welcome address by His Excellency, Distinguished Senator Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, CON and President of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as well as President of the African Parliamentary Union, APU. Shall we please give him another round of applause? Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, it is my singular honor and privilege to now invite His Excellency Right Honorable Kasama Supriano, the Chairperson of the Executive Committee of the African Parliamentary Union and Speaker of the Popular National Assembly of Guinea-Bissau. Your Excellency, thank you.
President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and President of the Authority of Heads of States and Government of ECOWAS, Honorable Bukola Saraki, President of the Nigerian Senate, and my dear friend, distinguished speakers of national assemblies and heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, members of government, your excellencies, chair of the Women Committee, your excellency, President of ECOWAS Commission, your excellency, members of the diplomatic corps, representative of international organizations here present, distinguished parliamentarians, military officers here present, Secretary General of APU, designated Secretary General, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I have it as a honor and a great privilege to wish each and every one of us a warm and welcome to the solemn opening ceremony of the 41st Conference of the African Parliamentary Union. The Conference of Speakers of National Assemblies of the African Parliamentary Union, which is holding once in a year, is an important opportunity in the life of every of our organization, and it provides us with the opportunity to deal with issues that are on the front burners with regards to the smooth administration of our continent. And there we do adopt recommendations which are addressed to our various governments and to concerned organizations. The 41st Conference of the African Parliamentary Union, which is opening here in this beautiful city of Abuja, upon the invitation extended to us by the Senate of Nigeria. But before any other thing, I would like, by virtue of my being the chairperson of the Executive Committee of APU, carry out a duty, and that is to commend with all respect of all the member parliament of APU, the speakers of national assemblies and all the parliamentarians here present, as well as on my own behalf, His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and President of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS. We are expressing to him our profound gratitude, not only for allowing this session to hold here in Abuja, but also and above everything for the great honor which he has bestowed on us by personally taking part in this opening ceremony of the 40th Conference of the APU. Your Excellency, the President of Nigeria, presents with us a memorable day where there is need for me to say so, the support that you have for the value of democracy, of peace, parliamentary representativeness, and also is also the sign of the interest that to the African Parliamentary Union as an institution contributing to the development of Africa. The support which you are lending, as well as all the efforts made, is really strengthening us in our activities as parliamentarians. I thank you for that, Your Excellency, President of the Republic. Your Excellency, President, sir, kindly allow me also, by virtue of my being the Speaker of the President of ECOWAS, and also the name of my own representation here, I'd like to present to you my profound gratitude for your involvement in the resolution of the political crisis, which 3 years ago have made the people of Guinea-Bissau to suffer a lot. Our thanks also go to the National Assembly of Nigeria, to the government and the people of Nigeria for the warm reception that has been accorded the various delegations and efforts made so that this session take place in an excellent condition. To the members of the diplomatic corps and representative of regional and international organizations, and to all the distinguished invitees, I'd like to say that we are very sensitive to the various efforts that have been made to take part in this ceremony. I'd like to also say that the APU is ready to continue to strengthen cooperation in all areas. Kindly allow me, my dear colleagues, that I also direct my gaze to the representatives of media and also pay vibrant homage for all the efforts which they have been making to publicize the outcome of all the efforts that we're doing, and also to promote democracy in Africa. I'd like to, of course, want to express our sincere encouragement for them. Your Excellency, President, distinguished parliamentarian, aside from the statutory issues relating to the renewal of our various organs, our discussion during these days will be focusing essentially on the role of parliamentarians in fighting against terrorism, armed banditry, and other organized crimes in Africa. On the other hand, the promotion of private investment as a major factor for the economic development in Africa. Our conference coming up at the time when some regions of our continents are facing terrorism, and of course as a veritable menace to our developmental efforts. These serious efforts which are taking place in our continents is really of sadness to many of us, and this has made us to come to the need to engage in collective mobilization of all the organizations, organs, and bodies to fight mercilessly against this scourge of terrorism. All the parliamentarians here meeting have a very strong thoughts of the sympathy and also towards the people who are victims of this kind of violence, and also that has also affected their aspiration to peace and security. As an organization whose calling is to promote peace, dialogue, social cohesion, democracy, good governance, terrorism in Cairo. We have always been in various countries of Africa, and we are which runs the risk of destroying the basis of our development. It is therefore legitimate that we should consider here in Abuja, in this hall, our contribution towards fighting against terrorism, armed gangs, and organized crimes, and bring up resolutions that our various heads of state would take into action and consideration to fight this scourge. And therefore, this will enable us, and I'm sure, will help us to reaffirm the role that our parliamentarians can and must play in searching for peace and in peace consolidation and in of democracy in our countries, as well as the security and development side by side with our government that have the responsibility of leading development and progress for our people. It will therefore be the opportunity for us to express with one voice our support for the effort fighting against a terrorist group, namely Boko Haram. Yes, we are calling for solidarity of all the African countries. There is a coordinated activity and at the regional and sub-regional level fighting against this phenomenon of terrorism. This enemy, which most often are invisible, trying to, of course, combat our countries, and our sustainable efforts should be to fight against this. The international community, in the spirit of solidarity, must pursue its efforts, which has been undertaken under the auspices of the African Union in fighting against terrorism, namely efforts aimed at preventing, at fighting, and at eliminating the funding of terrorism or terrorist activities. Your Excellency, President of the country, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, aside from this very thorny issue of terrorism, we are also suggesting, as I've earlier on indicated, to deal with some aspects of sustainable development of our continent, which represent among all our major objective to be attained, because without peace, I repeat that, security, democracy, there can never be any development. It is obvious that our continent should, of course, make notable efforts, and especially in area of economic growth, democratic government, and human development. But it remains a lot for us to do. We must pursue our efforts, because the mistakes in area of development are sources of the various evils that brings in poverty, social inequality, conflicts, and all the scourges that are being exploited by terrorism. It is within this very context that our discussion will be focusing on private investment as major factor of economic development in Africa, because as parliamentarians who have as objective to legislate, we have an important role to play with our government by adopting legislative measures and regulatory measures so as to be able to face the obstacle of development and investment. In a stable environment characterized by good governance and economic governance. On the other hand, the Women Committee of APU will be considering a major topic on the promotion of girl-child education as an effective means of fighting against early marriage in Africa. And of course, it is of our willingness to contribute as parliamentarians in the search for appropriate response to the aspiration of our people. I'd like to suggest that APU envisages 3 sessions per annum at least, and this will enable us to really continue to monitor some issues which are very dear to our hearts, such as the phenomenon of migration, which of course has really been of concerns to Africa, and which of course has been the subject of our focus last year. These are the various issues that I would like to, of course, bring up, so that in the course of this conference, we'll be able to exchange views on these very issues, while, of course, expressing the wish that our efforts be strengthened in our determination to provide a climate of peace, of security, and of development in our various countries. To round up, kindly permit me to renew Your Excellency, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to you, to the government, to the parliamentary authority, the Senate, and the people of Nigeria, the sincere thanks of APU, and our profound gratitude for the opportunity which you have provided us to hold our annual conference here. I thank you for your listening ears.
No, after this one is Baba Buhari.
Just before we invite number one citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to address us and subsequently move on to the conference, I'd like to make these announcements. Immediately after the keynote address by the special guest of honor, President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there will be a group photograph at the entrance of the Executive Hall. That is the entrance to this very auditorium at the far right. And the caliber of persons that are expected to join the President for this photograph will be in this order: heads of delegation, delegates, Nigerian delegation to the APU, principal officers of the National Assembly of Nigeria, clerk to the National Assembly, and Nigerian permanent representative to the ECOWAS Commission. These persons are expected to also join His Excellency the President at the holding room before the photographs. And that will be the President of the Senate of Nigeria and the President of the ECOWAS Commission. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I find it very pertinent and expedient at this juncture to make bold to invite Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to please come forward for your keynote address and subsequently declare this conference open. May we please welcome His Excellency to the podium with a very resounding applause. Your Excellency, the Presidency.
Please sit down. It's a President of the Senate, Federal Republic of Nigeria, Chairperson of the Executive Committee of African Parliamentary Union, President of the ECOWAS Commission, members of the National Assembly, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you all to Nigeria for the 73rd session of the Executive Committee and the 41st Conference of Speakers of the African Parliamentary Union holding in our capital city, Abuja. Your coming to Nigeria coincides with the time when our country has just concluded one more step in the journey towards widening our democratic practices by nominating candidates of various political parties for the general elections of next year. I would like to specifically thank the APU for the decision to hold this year's conference in Nigeria. It is no doubt a demonstration of the importance of the country in achieving and sustaining the lofty ideals and objectives of APU. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, since its foundation, the African Parliamentary Union has continued to champion the objective of bringing African parliaments of the objectives of the African Union to achieve durable peace. I am delighted that the 41st Conference of the Speakers, as part of its meeting, will be considering the role of parliaments in the fight against terrorism, armed gangs, and organized crimes in Africa. Terrorism, armed banditry, and organized crimes have continued to be a security challenge for member states of the African Union. The proliferation of arms, aided by abuse of the ease of movement of persons across freer borders, which have been historically in place to encourage African unity, have contributed to acts of terrorism by groups like Al-Shabaab, ISIS, and Boko Haram. Here in Nigeria, we have done a lot to reverse the terror trend and hold the advancement of Boko Haram. We have, in collaboration with our neighbors, strengthened our armed forces to effectively confront terror groups and have also initiated programs to address widespread poverty, which has been identified as a significant factor fueling unrest and boosting terror recruitment. In spite of this progress, we are not unmindful of the remaining challenges of armed invaders who ransack villages and small farming communities and commit terrible acts, including the cold-blooded murder of women and children. We are also making progress in addressing this challenge. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while I commend the actions of the African governments in dealing with these evil groups, it is my strong belief that the APU will develop strategies to assist governments in confronting this menace. And as chairperson of the Economic Community of West African States, I will be more than willing to fast-track your resolutions for deliberation and adoption at the ECOWAS sub-region and much larger African Union. the recently concluded Forum for Africa-China Cooperation held in China, many trade and cooperation agreements running into hundreds of billions of dollars were signed between China and individual African countries. These agreements will hasten the efficiency of the business and investment climate in Africa. I am pleased that the Conference of Speakers will also consider the promotion of private investment. The dynamics of global trade are changing fast. Foreign direct investment is a key index of economic performance. As the global economic superpowers redesign and restructure the global economy, Africa cannot afford to be caught off guard. We have to navigate these uncertain economic times with realistic plans in which the private sector is key. Barriers that restrict ease of doing business and private sector growth must be addressed by legislation, and it is hoped that your resolutions will aid the efforts of African governments in developing a more robust private sector to attract necessary investment in our economies. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am also delighted that the promotion of girls' education as a way to address early marriages will be the focus of APU Committee of Women Parliamentarians. This is another subject that requires close attention, and I assure you of the support and cooperation of the government of Nigeria. A few months back, 4 girls from a high school in Anambra State in southeast of Nigeria won the first prize for innovation at an international competition held in the United States of America. The success of these girls, some as young as 14, is a success for Africa as a whole. But more importantly, it is a demonstration of what can happen when the girl child is given the opportunity. Education should not be seen as a government program only, but as a human right and social imperative. Educating girls increases the probability of having more women innovators, entrepreneurs, and chief executive officers. Once again, I assure the APU of the desire of the government of Nigeria and others to consider your input on this subject with a view to improving the condition of the African girl child. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a conscious and affirmative resolve needs to be made by parliaments and governments across Africa to champion the cause of the continent and its people. I am convinced that you possess the required commitment to achieve this goal. As you settle down to deliberate on these important issues, I believe you will find time to visit and enjoy the sights and sounds of our capital city, Abuja. I thank you for your time and attention, and I wish you successful deliberations. Thank you very much.
With that standing ovation, can we please give His Excellency the President another big round of applause? It is almost a charge to all of us that this type of cooperation and synergy between legislators of the African continent, will make the continent more democratically viable, virile, economically strong, and would make Africa the envy of other continents of the world. It is at this juncture that we thank you for participating, but just to re-echo very quickly, these persons are expected to join His Excellency, the President, for a group photograph afterwards. And the category of persons will be heads of delegations, delegates, Nigerian delegation to the APU, principal officers of the National Assembly, clerk to the National Assembly, and the Nigerian permanent representative to ECOWAS. The President of the Senate and the ECOWAS President will be joining His Excellency the President at the Holden Room just before the photographs. With those announcements, Your Excellency, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we have come to the end of the opening ceremony for this 41st Conference of Speakers of the African Parliamentary Union. May we please rise for the national anthem.